Okay, let's pray. Lord, I just thank you for a chance to study your word, to worship you, to have fellowship, and just pray that you would guide me as I teach today. And Lord, I just pray for all these families that have lost friends and family members in this flood over in Kerrville. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay, so last week we started talking about gender inclusive translations. And pretty much from about 1985 to 95, 96, all of the translations that were coming out were doing it to some degree. And then there was that magazine article in 97 about the Stealth Bible, the NIV, and that caused a big uproar.
It's called the Stealth Bible?
The Stealth Bible was what they called the magazine article, called it the NIV, the TNIV, the Stealth Bible. So, Zondervan, IBS, they caved and said, we won't print it after all. We're going to go back to the 1984 NIV. And then there was a meeting at Focus on the Family with all the bigwigs from Zondervan and IBS and the Council for Biblical Manhood and Womanhood and Focus on the Family and Vern Poitras, et cetera.
Don't cut down my friend.
Okay. And so they got together and they came out with gender guidelines for how you're supposed to translate the various words, man, he, things like that. And so we were reading an article by Wayne Grudem where they were talking about some of the things that they decided. And I think Jessica asked about, well, why can't we just teach our people in our church that man means both man and woman? Okay. And Vern Poitras, I even quoted him. He said the same thing. And Mark Ritchie and I talked about this, and he says the same thing. So that is a thing. You couldn't do that. You can do that. And it would certainly make it easier to translate the Bible. But I guess my question would be, what is the percentage of Reformed Baptist homeschooled people in America as part of the culture? Would that be 1%? And so we can do that in our church, but how does that help the 15-year-old kid that gets saved at Young Life Camp and is given a Bible? Okay. And so would they be better off being given an ESV, or would they be better off being given an NIV? Okay. And so anyway, that I think it's probably not possible for us to influence the culture that much and change everybody's language back to 1950s English. So I'm going to continue. Anybody have any questions before we get started? Okay. So I'm going to continue with Wayne Grudem's article about when you can and cannot translate certain words certain ways. So he talks about brothers, sons, and fathers. And he says, we recognized that the biblical authors were perfectly capable of saying brothers and sisters when they wanted to, as in Joshua 2:13 and Mark 10:30. And we were concerned that the NIVI had added the phrase and sisters in many cases where the original text had not done so, as in Romans 8:29, in order that we might be the firstborn among many brothers and sisters. Okay, so they don't like that. And they said in parentheses, but I underlined it because I thought it was the most important part of the paragraph. The Greek text has only adelphoi, brothers, referring to all Christians. It was not our concern to decide how we today might speak of a group of Christians, but to represent faithfully in translation how Paul spoke of a group of Christians. Anybody see what's wrong with that? When he said brothers, he meant all Christians. Okay. And so saying brothers and sisters is actually more accurate and translates what he meant, right? And so he thinks that he's faithfully translating Paul there, but they're really not. If that's not what Paul meant, just brothers. And so we agree that brother and brothers should not be changed to brothers and sisters. I have a hard time believing these guys sat around and decided things like that.
These are old guys.
They are. They were. Okay, fathers. Finally, we recognize that the word father and fathers faithfully represent male leadership present in biblical families. And we agreed in guideline B3, father should not be changed to parent, and fathers to parents or ancestors. But I had to point out that in Hebrews 11:23, even the ESV says that by faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents. It's the Greek word fathers there. So they broke their own rule. So, but when the word fathers is used, is the idea of male leadership always what's meant? It is meant sometimes, but when it's just talking about our ancestors or the patriarchs that got the promises, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, then father leading is not really what's in view. Okay. And um, so I think it's like they're trying to carry this idea of male leadership into every place the word father is used, when it's not really what's in view. It's just talking about our ancestors. And using the word ancestors would be fine. Or the word patriarchs would be fine. Okay.
Not matriarchs.
Not
matriarchs.
Not matriarchs. That's right. So,
Can I ask you something?
yeah.
Because I thought about this as I was thinking about your class. In many senses, like you've already said, you're really preparing us for a future generation that don't think the same way we do. As you said, our grandchildren age and so forth. Because just because we understood this at one time, we come from a different generation,
Right.
as did Wayne Good and all these other guys you mentioned. So they understood it and they embraced it. And we may have understood it, but I just know for me, I discovered the NIV and I was a fairly new Christian. And I embraced that, or whatever that earliest one was. It opened up a lot of things for me as a new Christian because I was reading King James and sometimes I read it good, sometimes I didn't. But it was a great benefit to me just starting with NIV. And then I learned about that there was this thing called a dynamic equivalent. So, you know,
Okay.
I think we need to think about it that way. What audience
Right.
is this going to be? Audience is always important. What
Right.
audience are you trying to educate here?
Yeah.
Well, but don't we also have to think about it in context? So to correct Paul to say brothers and sisters, when he actually said brothers, and in his day and age and context, that culture, no females could read. And so when they heard this, it was being preached to males. I mean, it would still be accurate.
Mhm.
I'm not saying literal, I'm saying accurate to say brothers. Because in context of what Paul said, that's what the original text said.
Yeah, I can see that. But even if the ladies can't read and they're sitting in the synagogue, you know, if they say, I mean, my dad used to say brethren to the church in 1970s, that was our language. Okay. Phrase son of man. We are concerned that in some cases the phrase son of man has been omitted, as in Psalm 8:4. What is man that you are mindful of him? The son of man that you care for him, which in the NIVI was changed to what are mere mortals that you are mindful of them, human beings that you care for them. This obscured the connection to Hebrews 2:6, where the verse is quoted. We agreed, therefore, on guideline A9. The phrase son of man should ordinarily be preserved to retain intra-canonical connections. Ordinarily, I guess so. Sometimes you can not translate it son of man, right? But since he mentioned Psalm 8, and son of man is used 95 times in Ezekiel, and it just means human, okay? Son of man is not a messianic title until we get to Daniel 7:13. And then Jesus uses that phrase of himself constantly as the Son of Man, right? But we'll get to Hebrews 2 and we'll read it again there. But so I showed you this slide a couple weeks back when we talked about Hebrew parallelism, right? They say something and then they say it again with different words over and over and over again. And so we see up here, so when I look up at the heavens, which your fingers made, and see the moon and the stars, which you set in place. So two statements basically saying, talking about creation. And then it says, of what importance is the human race that you should notice them? And I've put in parentheses the other way you could translate it, man and him. Of what importance is mankind that you pay attention to them? Okay. So what's really going on in this verse is this is not a son of man, Jesus, Messiah passage. This is just, I got to find another way to say man. So I say man and son of man. I'm just repeating myself. Okay. So, and it's talking about creating Adam and Eve. So it's really talking about what is mankind? What are human beings? Well, human beings are the ones that you gave the job of taking dominion. That's what this psalm is about. Okay. And Adam and Eve didn't do a very good job. So,
But now we've lost the poetry, right? I mean, now it's just repeating the exact same words. Instead of saying, of what importance is the singular man that you should notice him, and of what importance is the descendants of Adam that you should pay attention to them.
Yeah.
You've lost it. You just repeat yourself.
You're saying son of man is more plural?
No, I'm saying that it's a parallelism. I agree with that.
yeah.
But I don't agree that it should be the exact same words twice.
It's not. I mean, it's human race and mankind.
But that's exactly the same meaning, right?
So is man and son of man.
Yeah.
Is it?
I think
Yeah,
so.
that's it.
But
It's in the Hebrew, man is Adam,
Mhm.
Adam.
Mhm.
The son of man is Ben Adam.
right.
So it would be two different phrases there. Be what is man that you pay attention to? What is the descendants or the son of man?
Okay. I see what you're saying.
Hmm.
That's possible. Maybe so. So anyway, this is now quoted in Hebrews chapter 2. So it says, and I'm going to read the whole section. For he did not put the world to come about which we are speaking under the control of angels. Instead, someone testified somewhere, what is man that you think of him, or the son of man that you care for him? You made him lower than the angels for a little while. You crowned him with glory and honor. You put all things under his control. For when he put all things under his control, he left nothing outside of his control. At present, we do not yet see all things under his control, but we see Jesus, who was made lower than the angels for a little while, now crowned with glory and honor because he suffered death, so that by God's grace he would experience death on behalf of everyone. So the TNIV, NIV 84 had, what is man, you are mindful of him, son of man, that you care for him. The TNIV then said, what are mere mortals that you are mindful of them, human beings that you care for them. And the NRSV actually has the same, but they swapped human beings first, mortals second. And then the NIV 2011 changed back to son of man for the second one.
Saying you think it's saying what is, let's just replace the words. What is Adam that you are mindful of him? His descendants that you care for them? Is that what you're thinking?
No, I think
that what
that
you're
we need to
saying?
preserve a son of man.
Yeah.
I just think that we need to preserve a son of man.
No, I was just trying to understand what you were.
Yeah, I think it's pointing out in Hebrews 2 that it's actually interpreting it for us
Mhm.
as being mankind and Jesus.
Yeah, he says it in verse 9, but we see Jesus. So when this came out, Blaine Grudem wrote, what's wrong? The TNI removes the possibility of connecting this verse with Jesus. No, it doesn't, because it says specifically in verse 9, but we see Jesus, because the author is connecting that for us, okay? Who called himself Son of Man, capital S, capital M. This is not a son of man Daniel reference. Okay. This is just the Hebrew parallelism of Psalm 8. Okay. So I don't think he's correct there. It mistranslates the singular Greek words huios and anthropos, son and man. Maybe. I don't think so. Those can sometimes mean child, and they can sometimes mean person, right? So it no longer refers to the human race as a unity named man. Human beings is unified. He even says that it's talking about the human race named man. So I don't see where he's losing this unity. It's talking about man versus the angels. They're a little lower than the angels. So we're still a unity. Okay. It's the name given by God in Genesis 5:2. Well, man is not the name given by God. Adam is. Adam is Adam. Adam is male, and Adam is mankind. Okay. And so man is an English word. So it's not really the name given by God. And says he talks about the mere mortals. This adds the idea of mortality that is not in the Greek text. Well, the word mortals doesn't have any concept of dying if it's a noun, like it's used here. It just means human. It only if it's an adjective does it mean that you're subject to death. So he's misunderstanding the way the word is used. Now, is it a problem if you get the idea of death in this passage? No, because the whole point of the passage is that Jesus became human so that he could die for humans, so that we would not have to fear death. So it's not even a problem if he misunderstands the word mortal, okay? Because the word mortality is all over the Greek text, if we go back and read it. Okay. So anyway, note that the man is created by God, was not mortal, and this passage has creation language in it. But the TNIV's goal has been achieved. The male-oriented details are erased. So I don't think that anything that he said there was actually correct. But anyway.
He was born in 1940.
So, but the Net Bible translates it man and son of man. They keep that. Okay. Probably partially for what you're saying. Another reason is that it's sort of a man, son of man, Jesus, he's the man. You've got this kind of a idea going. We're going to see the same thing with Nicodemus in a minute. Okay. So did we lost the connection to Psalm 8? I don't think so. Even if he says instead someone testified somewhere, I still think we could track it down. Right?
Isn't this a good argument? It's just the argument he made for we should read more than one translation. You want poetry, let's read King James.
Yeah.
I think Daniel Bird Wallace,
yeah,
he would tell you that, right?
So it's a complicated subject.
It is.
And I don't know the right answer. I'm just sometimes I read these guys and I'm like, what are you talking about? That's not good logic or good reasoning or something. So okay. Hebrews 12:7. Endure hardship as discipline. God is treating you as sons. For what son is not disciplined by his father? And the TNIV changed it to endure hardship as discipline. God is treating you as his children. For what children are not disciplined by their parents? Okay. So he says, what's wrong? The TNIV mistranslates the Greek terms huios and pater, son and father, which in their singular forms cannot mean child or parent. It also obscures the parallel with God as father in this passage. And again, the male-oriented details are erased. So the 2011 NIV changed it back and they at least changed the father back. And your hardship is discipline. God is treating you as his children. For what children are not disciplined by their father? So I'm sure that's why they fixed that or changed that.
Because we understand the first thing I need, and I need before we understand that when we just read it, we know that it's talking about all of us.
Mhm.
It's talking about God the Father. ultimately, right? So what would be the point in them changing it to children and parents?
I think they're trying to make it more of a, for the culture where, you know, it's not just fathers who are spanking the children, you know? So, I don't know. But you can see the what's going on with these guys writing these critiques of the new translations, and then they're changing back to, you know, partially anyway. So,
So is there, okay, my question would be, even if we all 100% agreed that it should be changed to children, and that in our society,
mhm.
both parents discipline their children. Even if we agree with that, how can we whitewash history to change what was happening at that time? Isn't scripture also a historical document?
True.
So aren't we imposing our modern culture on ancient people?
Yeah.
Maybe so. I would go back, my response would be, but while they used male dominant in a male oriented culture, they used male language, but did they mean men and women when they said what they said?
Even back then.
Even back then, when they're saying man, in 1611 in the King James, when it said man, did it just mean males? No. So if it didn't in 90% of the places, then can we translate it brothers and sisters? Okay, just or person. Okay. So that would be the issue, is are we going just by the word? We're going to keep the word the same even if our language has changed, or are we going to change and translate the meaning? Okay.
Oh yeah, I have no problem with the meaning. I just fear that we're losing contextual historical information. That actually we will lose understanding of what the life was like when it was written.
Maybe so. I hadn't really thought of it that way. Okay. What do the thee, thou, thy, and thine words mean? You, singular. I didn't know that. Neither did 44% of those King James only pastors that were surveyed. And you meant you plural. So when we got rid of all the these and the thys in the King James, there was a big stink about that.
In Texas.
Because we now didn't have a you singular. We had to figure out on our own if it was you or y'all. Right?
Texas version.
Hey, Texas language.
Yeah, there is a y'all Bible that was just published. John Dyer is part of that. I saw an announcement. I'm not buying one. But this was a big controversy. And so it's it's exactly like he and they. Okay. And so, when NIV says, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with him and he with me. TNIV.
Yeah.
I will eat with them and they with me. And the NIV, that person and they. So, why did they change that? Well, I'll tell you why they changed that. Because Wayne Grudem wrote, what's wrong? The TNIV mistranslates the Greek masculine singular pronoun autos, he or him. Therefore, it loses the teaching of fellowship between Jesus and an individual believer. The plural pronoun them naturally refers to those whom I love. No, it doesn't. It refers to the guy opening the door in the Church of Laodicea. So in the TNIV, if any one person in the church opens the door, Jesus will come in and eat with a group, with the whole church. What is lost is the teaching that Jesus will fellowship with one person individually and personally. For what reason? To eliminate unwanted male-oriented details.
With a feminist influence in that when they wrote that Bible?
I don't think so.
Why they want
I think that if a girl opens the door and lets Jesus in, they wanted her to feel included.
What's the fellowship verse? But we used it, at least when I was young, we used it as a salvation verse, didn't we?
Yeah.
Well, that's true. That's true.
You talk about misusing verses.
Right.
We used it as, at least I did. Understanding.
So he says, we should note that in order to avoid he used in a generic sense, as it is in this verse, the TNIV has to change hundreds of verses in similar ways. And the cumulative effect is a significant loss of the Bible's emphasis on individual responsibility and individual relationship with God. I do not have an exact count for the TNIV, but the NRSV had an earlier gender-neutral Bible had to eliminate about 3,400 uses of he in order to rid itself of such masculine generic statements. The TNIV preface says their changes include the elimination of most instances of the generic use of masculine nouns and pronouns. But Jesus and the New Testament authors use masculine nouns and pronouns in a generic way like this hundreds of times. Should we try to conceal their usage from the public today? So, if they were using masculine nouns in a generic way, like he says, then maybe translating it generically is not wrong, because that might be what he meant. Okay. So you can kind of see there is an overlap with this literal word for word versus meaning dynamic. It's embedded in this whole debate too. Okay. So John 14:23. If anyone loves me, he will obey my teaching. My Father will love him, and we will come to him and make our home with him. TNIV. Anyone who loves me will obey my teachings. My Father will love them, and we will come to them and make our home with them. Okay. So now, this isn't Grudem. This is Poitras and John Frey. Needless to say, the original Greek has a masculine singular, not a plural, at each of the italicized places. The meaning is similar in the NIV and the TNIV, but not identical. The TNIV wording with plural them opens the door to a corporate interpretation in which God deals not with each individual, but with the group, them corporately. This new translation obscures the point of the original. But why? To avoid the generic he, which has become a taboo word for political reasons. Earlier gender-neutral translations have received extended criticism for this kind of treatment of John 14:23, but still the TNIV is determined to perpetuate their mistakes. So it probably never occurred to them that all of these translations are just ignoring their laws or rules because they don't think they're correct. Because I think I have something coming up in a little bit. 130 more places that they use brothers and sisters in like, I can't remember what it is, the New American Standard 2020 edition. So I may have that wrong, but I think I'll have it in a future slide. So this is that whole they and them versus he and him issue. And so my answer to that is to go see what Paul does. And Paul quotes Isaiah 52 that says, how beautiful on the mountains are the feet of him who brings good news. And Paul quotes it in Romans 10:15 as the feet of those who proclaim the good news. So what we've lost here is the individual's responsibility to proclaim the gospel, and we can now only proclaim the gospel in as a group. We need to go out as a group when we proclaim the gospel. Is that what he's saying? No. But he changed him to them, right? Or there's no fear of God before his eyes. And Paul says there's no fear of God before their eyes. Okay. Does that eliminate the need for the individual to fear God? No. As we understand what the word they and their means. Blessed is he whose lawless deeds are forgiven, whose sins are covered. Blessed are those whose lawless deeds are forgiven. So I feel like changing he and him to they and them is just the way we talk. If I say, if someone wants to buy a car, they should save their money. Does that mean we have a group savings account? No. You know that I'm talking about that one individual who wants to buy the car. Okay. So I think there's plenty of reasons to keep the male-oriented stuff in various passages, but I feel like they've gotten hung up on some of their examples. I'm going, those were not good reasons to keep Hebrews 2:6, man and son of man. There are good reasons to keep it, but none of those, you know. So, um, so here's a couple verses that you probably want to keep as male oriented. NIV 84 says, even from your own number, men will arise and distort the truth in order to draw away disciples after them. And so the TNIV said, some from your own number, some will arise. And then he says, and Rudum says, what's wrong? In the TNIV, Paul no longer says that men will arise from among the elders of the church at Ephesus, but some will arise, suggesting there could be women elders at Ephesus. It mistranslates the Greek word aner, which is almost always male, okay? Not just, it's not the word anthropos, which often means person. I don't know if you remember last week, he was saying anthropos means man. Now over here, he's admitting that it means person. So the 2011 NIV said, even from your own number, men will arise and distort the truth in order to draw away disciples. So they put it back. The NRSV has some there also. And in the context, in verse 28, he's talking to the elders. So he is talking to men. And so and men were leaders in the church. So there's, a good reason to keep this as men will arise. Not that we don't have women who rose up and led people off with what Mary Baker Eddy and
Oh, yes.
right. So so I read this I think last week. With much regret, I must conclude that the NRSV has disqualified itself for use by the majority of the evangelical world by making the goal of eliminating masculine-oriented language more important than the goal of accuracy in translation. That didn't read that very well. The NRSV has made thousands of intentional changes in the sense of the text, and in so doing, it has become a translation that cannot be trusted. And if it cannot be trusted, then it will not be widely used. So, anyway, we've seen lots of examples that they've talked about. Some are good, some are, questionable. But here's a couple places where I would keep man. That Bible says in John 2:24, but Jesus would not entrust himself to them because he knew all people. He did not need anyone to testify about man, for he knew what was in man. Now there was a certain man, a Pharisee named Nicodemus. So this is the camera's showing you the whole football stadium, and then it zooms in on one person. Okay? And that's literally is what's going on. And if you lose the word man, then you lose that literary device that John is using there. Okay? So in the NRSV says he needed no one to testify about anyone, for he himself knew what was in everyone. Now there was a Pharisee, so we've gotten rid of all the man words. Okay, and it reads fine and means the same, but you've kind of lost some of what's going on in the passage. Okay. Now, remember, we got three categories: gender inclusive, gender accurate, and gender defenders. And it occurred to me that I got all three right here in this one verse.
Gender defenders.
Okay. The gender defenders first. Know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. For the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. Okay. So is he talking only to men, or does brothers refer to brothers and sisters? Okay. And then they say, let every person. That's the word man. Okay, so why did they translate that as person? I think the ESV is gender conflicted. Because they go back to the anger of man, right?
You mean they're not consistent?
They're not consistent.
Wow.
Okay. So, net Bible, understand this, my dear brothers and sisters. Let every person be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger, for human anger does not accomplish God's righteousness. Okay? So, that's more inclusive. Okay. I would say gender accurate. Then the NRSV. You must understand this, my beloved. Let everyone be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger, for your anger does not produce God's righteousness. Anybody see anything wrong with that? It reads very well.
You can have a righteous anger.
You can. Yes. Very good. The first thing I noticed was the word brother is repeated 3 times in chapter 1 and 3 times in chapter 2. And one of the things you do when you're studying your Bible is go, what's being repeated? Because it might be important. And so if James is talking about the family relationship of Christians, then we've lost that at the beginning of each of the paragraphs, right? So, and then the question about, is human anger a gnomic idea here where it's human anger versus righteous indignation, okay? And so he does switch, and I really found this first because I was looking up where does the Greek word aner, where is it used? Does it always mean men as in male? And in this verse, it doesn't. But I think it's a stronger word for man to emphasize the fact that this is human anger. Okay. And so Jesus got angry, and we were just reading Ephesians 4:26, be angry and do not sin, right? And so we've lost a lot in the NRSV translation. I think a verse like this would be a lot better to show the weakness of the gender inclusive NRSV than all those he, they verses. Okay. I don't know how many times they did things like this, and that would make me go, well, can I trust the NRSV? Not for the reason Grudem just gave, but for verses like that makes me question.
Is that what gender defender is?
ESV. Just leave it all man and son of man and he and him, and that's what I call gender defender. So
For honest, what the ESC derived from, it was rephrasing of which version?
it was the 1952 RSV. So the NRSV UE just came out in 2022. You know what they did in this verse? They now read just exactly like the Net Bible. So they put brothers and sisters in instead of just beloved, and they put human anger. So I don't know who talked to them about it, but somebody must have. Okay, recent developments. The Holman Christian Standard Bible came out as a result of the whole gender debate thing in 97. Okay. So they were gung-ho about let's not give into the culture. And they used man and men 3,097 times when they came out. When they revised it and got dropped the Holman part, Christian Standard Bible in 2017, they have changed about 550, 450. Nope. I'm going the wrong way. Yeah, 550. Men and man to things like person or someone or anyone or whatever. The New American Standard in 1995 had 3,847 uses of man and men. And the 2020 version, they lost about 1,200 of them. Okay. And if you notice, the numbers of the CSB and the NASB 2020 are kind of about 2,600. We're pretty close. So all of these translations are moving that way a little bit. And the 2020 NASB that's what I was thinking, has the 131 times that they added brothers and sisters instead of just brothers. So that's probably why MacArthur and company went back to the 1995 NASB when they then published the LSB. I would say this is probably the primary reason. So in summary, our language has changed, so it needs to be done to some degree. The amount of degree we can debate, but I think we can see that all of the modern translations are doing it to some degree. Paul did it. I think the TNIV and the NRSV went too far, and the 2011 NIV dialed it back. So, any thoughts or questions?
I was warned not to read the 2001. I actually realized I was reading it, and I found it very well. I didn't get.
I think it's you know a great
I feel
translation.
like there was any great heresies happening there.
No. Okay. Well, thank you. Oh, next week we'll talk about using the New Testament and going back and changing the Old Testament to match. Okay. And we'll look at a few passages where they do that. And then I'll be done. And then the next 2 weeks, James is going to teach on how we got our canon, the Apocrypha, the Pseudepigrapha, and those kinds of things. So that should be very interesting. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.